In the heart of York, a city packed with Roman and Viking history, there's a lonely stone tower perched on a grassy hill. Today, it's a picturesque English heritage site, a perfect spot for panoramic city views and family photos. But don't let the peaceful scene fool you. This monument, known as Clifford's Tower, hides 1,000 years of shocking violence. Its story isn't one of quiet decay, it's one of brutal conquest, religious persecution, civil war, and rebellion. This isn't just the largest surviving piece of York Castle, it's a scar on the landscape, a memorial to some of the darkest moments in English history. So how did this one small hill become the backdrop for so much suffering? To figure that out, we need to go all the way back to the beginning, to a conquest that would forever change England. But first, let's zoom in on one truly horrifying moment. The night is March the 16th, 1190. Inside the wooden keep that once stood on this very spot, 150 men, women and children faced an impossible choice: surrender to the furious mob outside and be forcibly baptised, or die by their own hands. What happened next would stain the history of this site forever, a tragedy born of religious hysteria and cynical greed. This is not just a peaceful English monument, this is Clifford's Tower, and its stones tell a story of violence, conquest and persecution. Our story really kicks off in 1068, just 2 years after the Norman conquest. William the Conqueror, a foreign king on a freshly conquered throne, was struggling to control England's fiercely rebellious north. York was a hotbed of resistance. To stamp his authority on the region, William ordered a castle to be built, a classic Norman motte and bailey. If you're not familiar, that's just a big man-made hill with a wooden fort on top. This first timber structure stood right where Clifford's Tower is today, a stark and brutal symbol of Norman power looming over the city. But one castle wasn't enough. The local population kept resisting, and in 1069 they allied with Danish invaders, destroying William's fortifications in York. William's response wasn't just to rebuild, it was to unleash a wave of terror so complete it earned its own grim name, the Harrying of the North. It was a scorched earth campaign of unimaginable cruelty. His armies marched across Yorkshire, burning villages, slaughtering livestock and destroying food supplies. The devastation was so absolute that chronicles tell people starving in the streets, with the region taking decades to recover. William had paid the Danes to sail away, leaving him free to inflict a terrible punishment on his own subjects. He then rebuilt his castles in York, stronger this time, establishing the city as the primary administrative centre for the north. The timber keep on its mound became the heart of York Castle, a place of royal authority, but one founded on violence and terror. For over a century, this wooden tower stood as a constant reminder to the people of Yorkshire of who was in charge. It was a prison, a fortress, and a symbol of an oppressive regime. Little did anyone know, its most horrific chapter was still to come, and the structure itself was doomed. By the late 12th century, a small but prosperous Jewish community lived in York. Like elsewhere in medieval Europe, they were barred from most professions, but were allowed to work as moneylenders, an activity forbidden to Christians, but vital for the economy. This made them both indispensable and deeply resented, especially by those who owed them money. They were considered property of the king, which meant they were officially under his protection, a protection they paid for dearly, but that protection was often dangerously thin. In 1189, when King Richard I, the Lionheart, took the throne, a wave of religious fervour and anti-Jewish violence swept England. Partly fueled by calls for a new crusade, riots erupted in London during Richard's coronation and spread to other towns. The trouble in York began after a fire broke out, creating chaos. A mob used the confusion to loot and burn the house of a wealthy Jewish man named Benedict of York, who had already been attacked at the king's coronation. Fearing for their lives, the community's leader led around 150 people, the city's entire Jewish population, to seek refuge in the royal castle. The castle's constable let them into the wooden keep, but then a terrible misunderstanding. The constable left the tower, and the terrified families inside, fearing he would betray them, refused to let him back in. It was a fatal mistake. By barring the king's man from a royal tower, they had technically defied the king. The constable, enraged, called on local troops to besiege the tower, but the real trouble came from local nobles, who owed a fortune to the Jewish moneylenders. They saw a golden opportunity. By whipping the angry mob into a frenzy, they could wipe out their creditors and their debts in one horrific act. The siege continued until the night of 16th of March 1190, the great Sabbath before Passover. Trapped with no hope of rescue, the community faced a final horrific choice. Their religious leader proposed mass suicide as a form of martyrdom to avoid the horrors waiting outside. According to the chronicles, the fathers of each family made an unbearable decision. They killed their wives and children before taking their own lives. To prevent the mob from desecrating their bodies, they set fire to the wooden keep. The flames consumed them and the tower, which burnt to the ground. The next morning, the few who had refused to take part and survived the night emerged, hoping for mercy. They received none and were immediately slaughtered. Approximately 150 people died. The rioters then went straight to York Minster and burned all the records of their debts, revealing their true, greedy motive. King Richard was furious at this attack on his authority and fined the city. But the ringleaders of the massacre escaped punishment. A new Jewish community eventually returned to York, but their existence was precarious, ending when King Edward I expelled all Jews from England in 1290. For decades, the Scorched Mound stood as a grim memorial. Finally, King Henry III ordered a new tower to be built, this time in stone. Construction started around 1245, but it was an on-again, off-again project that likely wasn't finished until the 1270s or even later. This is the tower we see today, and its unique quarterfoil, a four-leafed clover design, possibly inspired by French architecture. For centuries, it was just called the King's Tower. So where does the name Clifford's Tower come from? It doesn't appear in records until 1596. It most likely refers to Roger de Clifford, a rebel lord who was executed for treason against King Edward II in 1322. After being defeated in battle, his body was hanged in chains from the tower's walls, a gruesome warning to anyone who dared challenge the king. The tower would see more executions. In 1537, Robert Aske, leader of the Pilgrimage of Grace uprising against Henry VIII, was also hanged from the battlements. It also served as a prison. The famous Quaker George Fox was held here briefly in 1665. At one point, a corrupt jailer named Robert Redhead even tried to dismantle the tower and sell the stone before he was stopped. Its last major military role came during the English Civil War. In 1642, York became the northern headquarters for the Royalists. Clifford's Tower was refortified, its roof reinforced to hold cannon, and its storerooms filled with ammunition. For 2 months, in 1644, the Royalist garrison held out against a parliamentary siege, withstanding heavy bombardment. York finally surrendered after the Royalist army was crushed at the nearby Battle of Marston Moor. Parliamentarian troops then occupied the tower, which resentful locals scornfully nicknamed the Mince Pie. The tower's military life ended not with a bang, but with an accident. On St. George's Day in 1684, a ceremonial gun salute is thought to have sparked a fire that completely gutted the interior, leaving it the empty, roofless shell it is today. Its days of conquest and conflict were finally over. The story of Clifford's Tower is a stark reminder of how much dark history can hide in plain sight. If you learned something new today, do us a favour and hit the like button and subscribe for more hidden histories of Britain's most fascinating landmarks, and let us know in the comments what other historical mysteries you'd like us to uncover. For hundreds of years, a tower stood as a hollow ruin, a romantic but silent landmark. In the 20th century, it came under the care of English heritage, and its story began to be told again. A plaque was finally placed at the base of the mound in 1978, acknowledging the victims of the 1190 massacre. More recently, a major £5 million conservation project has transformed the site. A new freestanding timber structure has been installed inside, with walkways and a roof deck that lets visitors explore parts of the tower unseen for centuries and learn about its turbulent past. Like most things in York, we can't come here and not mention Dick Turpin. The castle's connection to crime and punishment continued, and in 1739 it held its most legendary prisoner, the highwayman Dick Turpin. After fleeing to Yorkshire under the alias John Palmer, the notorious criminal was arrested for horse theft and imprisoned in the wider York Castle complex, of which the tower is a part. His true identity was revealed when a letter he wrote from his cell was recognised by his former schoolteacher. He was tried at the York Assizes, convicted and hanged in the city's Knavesmere execution site. Putting on a famously bold performance for the crowd, his story, although heavily romanticised, added another dark chapter to the site's history. It's been a Norman symbol of oppression, the site of a horrific medieval massacre, a royalist stronghold, and now a place of remembrance. Clifford's tower stands today not as a simple ruin, but as a lesson. Its stones are a testament to a violent past and a powerful call for a more tolerant future.